What's up, everybody? I'm the Sonoran Desert Grower. I found this article. Today is May 31st, 2022. The article is entitled Southwest Mega Drought Pushes Hydropower to the Brink. It's written by Jason Ploutz, and it's published in Energy Wire, E&E News. This picture right here, it says electrical transmission towers stand near the Glen Canyon Dam at Lake Powell in Arizona in March. As the megadrought gripping the Southwest stretches into its third decade, energy providers are preparing for a future where hydropower is no longer a reliable, renewable resource. This month brought a raft of warning signs. The Colorado Basin River Forecast Center reported below normal snowmelt across the Southwest. Several large western reservoirs are at perilously low levels, and the Interior Department is holding back the release of pretty much 500,000 acre-feet of water from Arizona Glen Canyon's dam to prevent a hydropower shutdown. Utilities and grid operators say that they have this summer's energy needs covered, despite the low snowpack, but the drought has forced them to reconsider hydropower's long-term role as a steady backstop resource, as well as grapple with the lack of water for coal and nuclear plants and the heat impact on the grid. The premise behind hydropower being a reliable resource is that there's water behind the dam, said Nick Schlag, a partner with the consulting group Energy and Environmental Economics, Inc., E3. When water levels are so low that you can't actually run water through the turbines, the reliability value has been jeopardized. It's getting bad. Yeah, this is gonna mean blackouts. I don't, especially in California, I do not think that what was said here earlier, utilities and grid operators say they have this summer's energy needs covered. I don't believe that at all. There's going to be blackouts. Climatologists have called the Southwest record-breaking drought the region's driest period in the last 1,200 years. The drought has also coincided. Climatologists have called the Southwest record-breaking drought the region's driest period in the last 1,200 years. The drought has also coincided with a region-wide generation transformation as utilities bring on more renewables and retire coal plants, creating a grid that is more efficient but comes with reliability questions. The North American Electric Reliability Corp, NERC, recently warned that the drought could threaten electricity supplies in the Western interconnection, especially during a heat wave. The combination of high demand with low reservoir levels in the late summer can force electricity providers to lean on heavy emitting fossil fuel plants or risk power outages. In a report this month, the U.S. Energy Information Administration predicted that a drought could have the contribution of hydroelectricity to California's summer generation mix. That in turn would force the state to purchase more from nearby markets and rely on natural gas generation, increasing wholesale electricity prices and overall carbon dioxide emissions. That is definitely what's going to happen. California is going to have to rely on natural gas, and it is going to bring up wholesale prices of electricity. For now, hydropower isn't so imperiled that the lights will go out across the West. In a separate May report, EIA found that region-wide hydropower generation will actually be slightly higher in this year than in 2021, representing about 6% of the generation mix. In a statement to E&E News, the California Energy Commission said that while hydroelectricity makes up an average of about 10% of the state's electricity generation, there is no expectation of outages this summer directly attributed to the drought. The Western Area Power Authority, WAPA, the Department of Energy's power marketing administration that distributes power from the Colorado River to 15 states, said that the federal government's efforts to protect water levels at Glen Canyon Dam would also avoid serious problems. Although little can be done to influence the weather, WAPA anticipates having sufficient reserves this summer for our 3 balancing authorities and 1 sub-balancing authority in the West. WAPA spokesperson Lisa Mayman said, "It's just hard to believe that there's going to be no consequences for losing the ability to generate hydroelectric power, especially when we're talking about a state like California that uses a lot of power. And California has had blackouts in the past. So this does not make sense to me. Western states that have long dealt with drought conditions are used to the short-term impacts of water scarcity," said Jordan Kern at North Carolina State University College of Natural Resources, professor who studies hydroelectricity. Providers can turn to a coal plant to ensure reliability in the hot months, or can import electricity from the Northwest, where snowpack levels are significantly higher and hydroelectricity is more available. The bigger issue, he said, is the long-term impacts of a sustained drought, especially as fossil fuel plants retire. From a grid perspective, if you've historically relied on having a certain amount of hydropower in the summer, the amount has allowed you to build less of other resources, Kern said. If moving forward, you'll have less hydropower during the hardest part of the year, you'll be looking to either build more or retire less. The California Energy Commission said that the state has developed contingency resources like demand reduction incentives and backup generation, as well as increasing output beyond normal limits from existing sources that can be drawn on the event of conditions such as extreme west-wide heat events. Governor Gavin Newsom has also proposed a strategic electricity reliability reserve that will enable the state to have 5,000 megawatts available in the event of an emergency like a drought. Everyone's trying to make it like they got it together, but then when they don't, it's like, it's very interesting how the drought is connected to electricity production and the electricity grid and how it affects different aspects of our lives and how everything is interconnected. Okay, I'm gonna keep reading. WAPA has already had to purchase additional power to meet its obligations to customers in 6 states. It has sought a rate increase for wholesale electricity customers in the Colorado River Storage Project, which could cause ripple effects across the region as utilities try to keep costs low. We are actively exploring potential alternatives to marketing hydropower, managing electricity rates, and maintaining the infrastructure in worst-case conditions, said WAPA's Mayman. We're also working closely with our generating partners to identify efficiencies and manage costs. In a report for several power providers in the Southwest, E3 warned of a significant and urgent need for new resources across the region, in part because of the lost hydroelectricity potential from the drought. The region faces a gap of almost 4,000 megawatts of effective capacity by 2025 as populations grow. Hydroelectricity declines and existing fossil fuels plant retire, and the report found. The gap could rise to 13,000 megawatts by 2033 with no action. 2033 with no action. The utilities that rely on hydropower typically have their planning approaches factor in a range of risks to different conditions, and I think that they are doing a pretty good job of planning for and anticipating new capacity, E3 Schlag said. But given the magnitude and scale of the challenge ahead of us, there's a lot of steel that needs to be put in the ground over the next 5 to 10 years. Any, de any delays and supply chain issues make the concern acute on how they will execute those plans. So again, we're talking about steel and supply chain issues and the new reality that we're living after COVID, or depending on how you look at it, we're still in a pandemic or whatever. But yes, again, a lot of these news articles I've been reading, the kind of the common themes are outdated infrastructure, outdated policies. Um, for example, the groundwater laws in Arizona. And now we're getting into the reality of the supply chain and the reality of the water is going to be gone. Like folks are finally kind of grasping with the fact that these hydroelectric power plants are going to be offline in the near future within a matter of months, maybe even weeks at this point. Rippling effects across the power system. Although hydropower is the most obvious victim of the drought, the NERC report also warned that dry conditions can ripple across the power system. A drought accompanied by a heat wave can spike demand, while dry conditions also raise the risk of wildfires that could threaten transmission lines and solar farms. The NERC report also notes that drought conditions on the Missouri River Basin has lowered water levels, which can affect thermal power generators that rely on the river for cooling. That echoes a warning from a report released last year by analysts in the Energy Department's National Renewable Energy Laboratory, which warned that water supplies to coal and nuclear plants could dwindle. The report included a scenario where an extreme drought drew down water levels across 30 reservoirs in Texas, affecting operations at 1/5 of the state's power plants and leading to significant capacity disruptions. This is in June 28th, 2021. And Texas has had power grid blackouts. So again, the drought is affecting the Southwest energy supply. In Utah, coal produces more than 50% of the state's energy, necess necess necessitating large amounts of water for cooling. Edwin Stafford, a marketing professor at Utah State University, working on renewable energy, estimated in a report last year that the state's energy sector used at least 16.6 billion gallons of water in 2020, in large part to cool coal plants. Rocky Mountain Power, the largest energy provider in Utah, uses an estimated 9.4 billion gallons of water a year at its fossil fuel plants, according to an integrated resource plan from the utility parent company, Pacific Corp. So this is really interesting. I had no idea that you needed water to cool down coal production plants. So, and that's a lot of water, 16.6 billion for the state of Utah. So that's for the entire state. And the largest company, Rocky Mountain Power, just by themselves used about half of that, 9.4, or a little over half. Okay. If the state wants to keep its coal and gas plants going, not only will they continue to guzzle water, they will continue to do it in an environment where the need for the water is more intense, Stafford said. We've got to drastically cut the water use in our energy sector if we're going to accommodate any population growth. In March, Utah lawmakers passed a bill that would require the state to study how much water is consumed by power production, including planned hydrogen energy deployment. In a plan released in May, the Utah state government said it was committed to supporting a clean energy future, as well as any of the above energy routine, although it did not commit to any greenhouse gas reduction or coal retirement goals. The plan, however, did note that Utah's 29 utility-scale hydroelectric plants, which accounted for 19% of renewable generation in 2020, are at risk from the recent and ongoing drought. So they have almost 20% of Utah's power is coming from hydroelectric, and we're in a huge mega drought. So this is particularly bad for Utah. Rocky Mountain Power is doing all we can at our own hydro facilities to manage during this drought, said spokesperson David Eskelsen, adding that there are contingency plans to ensure continued reliable services to customers at the utilities' coal and natural gas plants. Kern, the North Carolina State University professor, said that with states and utilities operating in known drought conditions, reliability should be sufficient this year. But as the drought stretches on, things can get worse, he said. What happens if next year everyone, including the Northwest, is under stress? Then it becomes a much more difficult situation, Kern said. All right, that's the entire article. So one of the things I was thinking about when I was reading this article is um, there there was some mentions of solar power generation, but I don't see why, especially in Arizona, we can't set up more solar power farms. Uh, do y'all know if solar power generation requires water to cool stuff down so that it doesn't shut down in the heat? I don't really know. I had no idea that coal power plants needed water to cool down. Like what are they cooling down? I let's Google that because I would like to know. Coal power plants use water to cool down. Let's figure this out. The amount of cooling required by any steam cycle power plant of a given size is determined by its thermal efficiency. It has essentially nothing to do with whether it is fueled by coal, gas, or uranium. All right, so this is for any power plant that does coal, natural gas, not grass, and nuclear, which would be uranium. However, currently operating nuclear plants often do have slightly lower thermal efficiency than coal counterparts of a similar age, and coal plants discharge some waste heat with combustion gases, whereas nuclear plants rely on water. So nuclear uses a lot of water to cool itself more than coal. Nuclear power plants have greater flexibility on location than coal-fired plants due to fuel logistics, giving them more potential for their siting to be determined by cooling considerations. And this is by the World Nuclear Association, so obviously this is going to be pro-nuclear. The most common types of nuclear power plants use water for cooling in two ways. To convey heat from the reactor core to the steam turbines, to remove and dump surplus heat from the steam circuit. In any steam Rankine cycle plants such as present-day coal and nuclear plants, there is a loss of about 2/3 of energy due to intrinsic limitations of turning heat into mechanical energy. So I guess this is gonna happen for coal and nuclear. You gotta remove and dump surplus heat from the steam circuit, and you do that with water to cool it down. The bigger the temperature difference between the internal heat source and the external environment where the surplus heat is dumped, the more efficient is the process in achieving mechanical work, in this case, turning a generator, creating electricity. hence the desirability of having a high temperature internally and a low temperature in the external environment. This consideration gives rise to desirably siting power plants alongside very cold water. Many power plants, fossil and nuclear, have higher net output in winter than summer due to differences in cooling water temperature. So this means we should have no coal, no nuclear in Arizona because it's freaking hot here and we don't have no cold. Like where are you gonna get cold water here? Like I don't know if that even exists. Yeah. So this is very interesting, right? So like for example, Utah, is there cold water in Utah? I don't know. I know that Nevada has a lot of nuclear power plants. S- So where is that water coming from? Yeah, I learned a lot today reading these articles and about how water is used in power production and how the loss of water resources is going to affect power production because apparently you need it to cool down nuclear power plants and coal power plants. So we're we're definitely walking into a future with blackouts. And if you can afford to set up solar panels that you um, where you can bank the power and not sell it back to the power grid, I think that would be the most um, reliable for like families and homeowners and individuals and whatever, like just regular citizens and stuff. Um, because then you will have power when the grid goes out, right? And you won't have to rely on a generator and stuff like that. So if you can afford solar panels, and I'm talking to folks here in Arizona, because obviously if you're in another part of the country where you don't have as much access to the sun, it might not make sense. But here, a lot of people have solar panels, but they're mostly connected to the grid. And so that just kind of makes me think again about solar. Like, does do solar farms require water to cool down anything in the production of energy? Um, let's go ahead and look that up. Okay, in all thermal power plants, whether fossil, nuclear, or concentrating solar, heat is used to boil water into steam, which runs a steam turbine to generate electricity. Wow, I'm learning here. Okay. The exhaust steam from the generator must be cooled prior to being heated again and turned back into steam. This cooling can be done with water, wet cooling, or air, dry cooling, or a combination of both, hybrid cooling. Water cooling is the most efficient. CSP plants using parabolic trough or power tower technologies must use some form of cooling, while PV solar facilities do not require water for cooling. All right, so solar panels do not require water for cooling, and we're in Arizona. The Nevada Solar One parabolic trough plant consumes 850 gallons of water per megawatt on a 360-acre site near Las Vegas, or about 300,000 gallons per acre per year. In comparison, agriculture in Nevada requires almost 1.2 million gallons of water per acre per year, nearly 4 times the consumption of the solar power plant. So what are they using the water for? The Department of Energy compared the costs and benefits of the chief crop of the Imperial Valley area, California, alfalfa, to the benefits of potential parabolic trough solar plants. Researchers found that solar plants would use approximately 25% of the water required for a similar parcel of land growing alfalfa. Additionally, the USP plant was estimated to generate more revenue for the community and create more higher wage jobs. So let's go at the beginning here. Solar power plants, whether concentrating solar power, CSP, or photovoltaic systems, PV, offer pollution-free electricity generation with impacts on local water sources that are comparable to and often less than traditional fossil fuel generation. So the actual making of solar panels will generate pollution. Water use requirements for solar power plants depend on the technology and the climate conditions at the site. In general, all solar power technologies use a modest amount of water, approximately 20 gallons per megawatt hour or a gallon per megawatt, for cleaning solar collection and reflection surfaces like mirrors, heliostats, and photovoltaic panels. Wow, so they're accounting for the actual like cleaning of the solar panels and stuff. For comparison, a typical family uses about 20,000 gallons of water each year, more than the amount of water needed per megawatt of photovoltaic generation capacity. In all thermal power plants, whether fossil, nuclear, I already read that. All right, well, so solar power plants do use water because they need to clean the panels. And, out here in Arizona, it is pretty dusty because it's dry. So they're definitely going to be cleaning the panels. But according to this article right here, and this is obviously pro solar, uh, it only uses 25% of the water that you would need in comparison to run a coal power plant. And then thermal power plants use even more water. All right, well, I think we should have more solar power plants here, and because the hydroelectricity option is pretty much off the table, um, which is sad. But I do feel that we could actually produce more power with solar. Like we have sun year round here. It just makes a lot of sense. And um, what doesn't make sense is setting up coal and nuclear plants that need cold water, right? So um, if you enjoyed this content, please consider subscribing. The button is down below. Just click that button and boom, you'll get notified when I upload a new video. I also have exclusive tutorials on how to farm in the drylands on my Patreon account. I also have a 100-page book that I published on my Patreon account. It's called the Dryland Permaculture Growing Guide, and it's exclusive to my Patreon community. You can't get it anywhere else. So go to www.patreon.com/the Sonoran Desert Grower and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.